Doctor Who Season 16 continues the Graham Williams era of the show to new horizons with the show's first true season arc, The Key to Time. Season 15 proved that the show was able to continue without Hinchcliffe as producer and still find its way, but Season 16 had to further that vision with a new companion while further defining this new era of the show. Through a couple of bold moves, Williams confidently continued the show with a season that suffered some of the same problems as before, but was bolstered by a much more consistent string of stories and a rather intriguing addition to the TARDIS in the form of a new Time Lord. Although this is not the first season to have interconnected stories, and I could make a case for some prior seasons of the show aiming at an overarching narrative, this is the first time the show truly commits to what a modern audience would view as a full season arc carrying across multiple stories. We are introduced to the concept of the Key to Time, given a reason for why the Doctor must collect all of its segments, and a justification for the inclusion of a new companion in the form of Romana. It is a decidedly original way to start the show, with the Doctor reluctantly going on a journey for the Time Lords because he really has no other choice. The setup is not just an excuse for these 6 stories, but also neatly invites a fresh character dynamic that will carry across this entire season. It's rare for a singular season of the show to have such a focused and driven purpose behind its characters and stories. Things may connect, characters may evolve, and this is not the only time the show builds upon itself, but to have such a specific vision contained inside of one season is wholly unique. And as a continuation for this new era of the show shepherded by Graham Williams, I must give props to The Key to Time, which feels much more like its own distinct version of Doctor Who and what it should be than Season 15. Although there may not be a story here that quite reaches the heights of something like Horror of Fang Rock, that is a serial that feels decidedly like a continuation of a prior era as opposed to a new vision of the show. That's not a critique, just an observation. Whereas The Key to Time is very much a product of new management. You wouldn't get something like this from the prior creatives, and Williams generally plays to the strengths of the lighter tone that the show is now embracing. The pirate planet would feel totally at odds in the Hinchcliffe era, but here it feels right at home. And lest somebody take this to mean the show is all fun and games now, Season 16 does find time for moments of serious drama and atmosphere. In the Ribos Operation and the Stones of Blood in particular, the show finds time to embrace a more grounded reality and to give the audience some variance in the stories being told. And that's the success of The Key to Time. There may be a generally lighter approach to the program, but when it comes to the actual stories being told, we still get the contrast of the light and the dark. Even in The Pirate Planet, a story I think of as very bright and colorful, there are certainly some dark elements and some effective uses of atmosphere. The Key to Time as a whole just feels like the right direction for the show, and a great way to continue this vision of the program while still, at its core, being the same show audiences know and love. A huge component to the secret success of this season is its inclusion of an entirely new and original character that brings a true breath of fresh air into Doctor Who. I am of course talking about Romana. It's hard to really think of a character in the show that pushes back against the Doctor, and so much does her own thing, as Romana finds herself doing across this season. The role she fits within here is very exciting because having another Time Lord feels as close as the show is going to get to bringing us an equal to the Doctor. She may be younger than him, but she is also very knowledgeable, and in places her knowledge eclipses his. Immediately, he is put in an unfamiliar position where we see his patience and his kindness tested. How does the Doctor react when the Time Lords force him to travel with somebody and aid in the completion of his mission? His authority is called into question in a way that the show rarely dares to attempt. And I cannot commend the portrayal of Romana by Mary Tamm enough, because she is absolutely wonderful and brings a presence and regal quality to the character. You completely believe that she is from a society of people that feel superior to others, and she does a lot to sell that in her performance. It's a graceful balance because she stands so tall as an individual, but she also has a uniquely charming presence. I love seeing the way she interacts with the Doctor and how they get along, or as the case may be, how they don't get along. It's such a great balance because you understand why he treats her the way he does, and his attitude only causes more friction from her. You almost get the sense that she has to treat him like a baby a little bit, and just allow him to have a tiny tantrum sometimes. Mary Tamm does a great job here and serves such a unique and intriguing position as sort of a peer to the Doctor, but also not. She has a different experience to his, and she is much more representative of Time Lord society. She is somebody working for them, and he is somebody who has run away from them. And these two differing but familiar perspectives make for a startlingly great duo. As great as Romana is, there are definitely times when the writing of this season can fail her or not give her quite as much to do as other characters. On the whole, she is served well, perhaps better than your average companion, to be honest. But it is worth noting that Mary Tam can fall victim to the same writing that any companion is given, where the character is only as good as the script delivered. But even having said that, she does so much to define that character and to make her feel like a consistent person and presence across this entire season. Even if the show can sideline her on occasion, Tam is so great at bringing life to the screen that she really makes the most of her time in the show. I have heard differing reports about why Tam left the show, some citing her getting pregnant and some citing her dissatisfaction with the writing, not feeling that her character was going anywhere. Truthfully, I don't have the reality, and in my limited research, I was not able to find it. If you have any sources that would enlighten me, I would greatly appreciate that. But if the latter is the case, the writing, that is an understandable reaction, given some of the positions she is put into later in the season. But even having said that, I do feel that there is growth for her character across this season, particularly in her relationship with the Doctor. In revisiting the Armageddon Factor, I was struck by the way she catches the Doctor off guard by repeating back his own words to him, much as he has done to her. For any weaknesses that may be present, there is some genuinely strong and effective characterization of this character that I very much appreciated. I certainly do wish we had gotten more from Tam on the show, but her singular usage in this season works very well and is quite fitting in its overall arc and the trajectory of this story. Romana is a great character, and I'll have more to say about the continuation of her as we continue into season 17. And ultimately, I am very fond of The Key to Time. I just really enjoy the flavor of these stories and like the direction the show took. It's a difficult thing to follow up the Hinchcliffe era, and truthfully, anybody that was given that task was going to have a hard time. And for my money, Graham Williams does a good job of continuing it into something new. It is worth noting that this was my introduction to the classic show, and may have been the first full season of Doctor Who that I'd ever seen. And since then, I've watched it through 3 times in full. I have a fondness and attachment to this season at large, but in spite of that, I feel that I have been fairly assessing this run of stories and highlighting any criticisms that I may have within it. On most of the levels that this show needs to succeed, it does. That fresh dynamic with Romana and the Doctor does so much, and it's just so fun to go on adventures that feel that little bit more purposeful, but still have their own distinctive flavor. But it is worth noting that it does have a couple of those weak spots, and chief among them for me is probably its villains. Don't get me wrong, there are a couple of effective villains within here, but for my money that is by far the weakest element within this season. You get a fair number of loud, shouting villains throughout here without a lot of depth, and although this season succeeds in spite of that, and a number of them are just fine, a strong villain does wonders in making a story memorable and making it stand out, hence why a season like Season 13 is so great, with villains like the Zygons, Sutekh, Harrison Chase, and the Chronoid. If we'd had even a couple of truly great villains within here, I think it would have done a lot to hold this one up. And yes, Season 13 is a dramatic example, given the quality of that season on the whole, and to give Season 16 some credit, we definitely have some effective villains within here. It's just that the likes of the Captain from the Pirate Planet and the Count from the Androids of Tara don't really stand out. They certainly work in their given stories, but there's not really much to say about them. And in fairness, it is largely the final 2 stories that drop the ball in terms of the foes that the Doctor faces, but up until then, they were doing okay. It's just not an element that really stands out, and by virtue of the many things that are working, it definitely becomes the weak spot of the season. But even having said that, they do very well without particularly strong villains because everything else in here is just working pretty dang well. And talking about that ending just for a moment, Season 16, although an improvement on the previous season, does share a very similar issue. The season is front-loaded with all the good stories, and by the time you get to the end, you do get hit with a couple of middling or disappointing entries. I could make a lot of comparisons between the Invasion of Time and the Armageddon Factor because some of the issues are so parallel. The bland settings and running or walking down corridors for episodes on end, the multiple villains that don't get the focus or depth they should, and as ending points for each season, they both feel like some of the only times Classic Who ever attempted season finales as a big ending, even more so with the Armageddon Factor. And both of them struggled to really pull it together into the satisfying sort of epic that they were being aimed for, or even just a consistently compelling story, scale aside. I think the Armageddon Factor has both the higher highs and the lower lows for me. The first couple of parts are quite engaging, but then things fall off rather dramatically before picking up a bit towards the end. Whereas with the Invasion of Time, I don't feel like I ever got the opportunity to get all that invested. And as much as I may feel a little deflated by the end of this season, the truth is that it never sinks as low as Season 15. Any issues I had with its execution hold true, but when I reflect upon the experience of The Key to Time, it is a fond memory. The journey of the season never truly outstayed its welcome, even with a couple of stops along the way that weren't fully justified. It's a season that leaves me satisfied about the journey and hopeful about the direction the show is going, confident that it is able to carve a new path for itself and define a new era despite following something that was so good. It's an interesting one because I can certainly understand more dramatic readings of this, and I do have legitimate grievances with a couple of elements in the finale, but I don't find myself looking back at season 16 and groaning. I just don't. Those couple of rough patches soften, and the good within here holds up anything that isn't as successful. Overall, The Key to Time continues the show's new direction to much success, giving Tom Baker a range of diverse stories, both familiar and inventive. You get a proper range of what is capable for the show, and it feels that Graham Williams' era is starting to better find its own voice. It doesn't have the highs of Horror of Fang Rock nor the lows of Underworld, but with a run of 4 consistently solid stories at the start, this season has a lot going for it. And that's before we mention the show's freshest and most delightfully captivating TARDIS duo in years. Tom Baker is as comfortable as can be in this role, perhaps to a fault, but finds some true moments to shine throughout here, especially in a gem like the Androids of Tara. And Mary Tam is every bit his equal, commanding the screen and challenging the Doctor throughout here. They are a blast to watch and quickly redefine the show through their exceptional chemistry. I always have a good time with season 16, and I'm going to give The Key to Time a rating of 7.5 out of 10. And that pretty much does it for today, folks. Feel free to let me know what you think about this season of the show. It's hard for me to imagine somebody really having a distaste for this season in particular, but perhaps that's just my own bias to it. So I'd love to know what you think if you feel like sharing, and if you join me on a Sunday in the near future, I will be bringing you a ranking of the 6 stories from this season. So I hope to see you around for that whenever it arrives, but if not, that is totally cool, so long as you know that I appreciate your time here today. And with that said, thank you very much for watching, take care, and have a lovely week.